Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Politibabble podcast, where we're back after a very, very long break. It's good to be back in the studio, as usual. I'm Archibald Elliott, and I'm joined by my wonderful co-host,
Oliver Sykes.
So yes, it has indeed been a very long time since we've been back here in the studio. I've been off at a monastery, and Oliver as well had exams.
Yes, seems to be an occurring story every time we come to do a podcast, that it's a little bit... it's been a what, like every time we go to do one, it's been a long period of time since the last one. So, mainly because of exams and other such things, and I suppose we've just been busy, and I suppose a lot has gone on in our, in the political systems, but
or has a lot gone on? I think that's
true.
Has much changed?
No,
one, I think, can take 2 months out of the political system and come back, and I think it's not that much change.
Things have altered, perhaps.
Yeah,
but
indeed.
But nothing's really sort of been reformed. We'll say that.
If it needs reform, but I'm sure it should be in time.
The main thing is that people have stepped back, really, or stood down. But yes, I think it's actually quite useful to not always is to take a little break every now and then, because it sort of gives us a better chance to reflect. And I suppose for one sort of well-being in a way, constantly looking at what is going on in the political system when it is, at times sort of not the most positive. We could say that, couldn't we?
Well, I think the Isle of Man government, although one could argue it does take much time back from things, it never gets anything done, I think would benefit from this approach in one aspect, of retrospective reflection. That is the ferry terminal. They've now announced, as of today, I think, or was it yesterday or something like that, that they're going to put £10 million into the capital expenditure fund to fund this ferry terminal. It's already racked up a bill, £35 million over budget. Perhaps they, I think, need to take some time back to sit, reflect, and think, was that a wise choice?
Well, I think it's a bit too late, isn't it? I think they have to. They need this extra £10 million to be able to complete the project, because I imagine it wouldn't get signed off, it won't actually go into use.
One could argue against that aspect on the fact that when they spent £35 million, they said we need another £35 million to have the project done. And while we're just continuing to throw good money after bad, there was a funny skit in the Big Bang Theory. If you watched the Big Bang Theory, Oliver, if not, I should spoil it. And any listeners who haven't watched it, I should also spoil it. But Mr. Sheldon Cooper was on there talking to President Hagelmeyer of the University of Caltech in California. And he was saying, oh yes, my project to do a silly scientific project, it cost many, many billions. It only cost you 10 million. And President Hagelmeyer says, you can do all of that for 10 million? He said, well, no, I wouldn't do it for 10 million. Once you spent 10 million, you're more likely to spend 20 million. And once you spent, he said, oh, so it only cost 20 million then. And it racked up to about many billion or so dollars. Namely because after you spend a little bit of money, you're more inclined to spend more to see results, because you can't go back to your public looking silly after spending 35 million.
Yes, well, very, very, very true that we're going to... that this will be a lesson to learn from, but in so many areas that we discover that. But I suppose it's difficult for me to comment, because I don't make the decisions. That's down to the politicians.
Do you think you would make better decisions, Oliver?
I don't know, because I don't know. It's an awful lot of responsibility, isn't it, to be managing a department? But maybe I could. I don't know. Could you?
Yes. Well, it's only the fact. I'm not quite sure. But it's not just I think there are a lot of politicians now raising questions who say, is this really value for money, what we're paying out? Especially if you look at the building, it's a less prime spot than the current place. And a ferry terminal is just that. It's to wait in for an hour or so, perhaps, at the most, before you go onto a boat. It's not supposed to be sort of a glorious tourist attraction, somewhere to go and sit for the afternoon and enjoy.
No, but obviously with
place.
delays and weather and all the factors and places such as events such as the TT, where you've got high volumes of people coming from all over the place, and often people get to the boat quite a bit in advance, and if you've travelled from across the country, you want to be there in plenty of time, so you'd rather have a facility to go to. But I understand, and I think it's not necessarily the building itself, but I think it's the area that they chose. And I don't know. I don't know, because I don't know the ins and outs of it all, and you know.
Are you saying, Oliver?
There's been no inquiry, but perhaps it's like the surveys, because it seemed, I think a lot of it was to do. Well, one was to do with, I think, I could be wrong on this, but I think it was to do with sort of inflation, and then sort of getting the skilled workers in to be able to do all like the groundworks. And I suppose you are working with, the sea, aren't you, in trying to, weather conditions can prevent you being able to undertake certain aspects. But we must talk about the fantastic boat that we now have in Douglas Harbour, costing less than the Liverpool Sea Ferry Terminal will do, and probably will be worth it in some ways.
Yes, I'm more inclined to say that, yes. I'm more inclined to say that the Manxman is indeed worth it.
Well, I think a lot of people now are, even though the Manxman probably ran a little bit late in getting here, and probably, I don't know whether it actually has cost. I don't think it did cost us any more because of the delay.
No,
I think the people who were manufacturing it said, no, we'll cover the costs for that. Although the only thing in terms of costs that we might complain about is perhaps the luxurious unveiling that happened the other week, and the cost to the taxpayer of that.
Well, I think it was actually a cost of the... Well, one could argue it's a cost of the taxpayer by virtue of being the Isle of Man Steam Packet Company Limited, which is a Treasury-owned company. But
sorry to interject
yes.
there. People were complaining about the fireworks. They had a fireworks, but apparently, and how it should have been drones. We shouldn't have fireworks anymore. We should have drones.
Awfully dull.
But then someone said, because I think the main thing is because, well, it's coming out of my pocket if it was funded. But then I think people had said, no, actually, it was the company that built the ship said, no, we'll provide the fireworks for the.
I mean, I personally
but
believe...
I could be wrong on that matter.
I personally believe
clarify
the Manxman is too large. It's a very grand ship. From the images we've seen, there's no public tour yet, a matter for another time, but I do think it's worth the money we paid for it, or rather the company paid for it. But I question whether we needed something quite of its colossal size, considering it is providing a ferry service.
Yes, well, it's also it's a lifeline, as many people say. Archie laughing there. No, it's important because with the state of the Isle of Man airport at the moment, it's good that we can have, and especially if we want to bring people across, families with camper vans, people coming on electric bikes, bicycles, people coming over with kayaks, all sorts. You know what I mean?
The boat is certainly the more pleasant option.
Yeah.
Yes.
And just to get people over here, if we want people to have people from the UK to holiday on the Isle of Man, then we need a boat, and we need a big boat with lots of cabins and all this. It's got double the amount of cabins, hasn't it? It's got better facilities for people who want to bring pets and animals over.
It does feel more like a
cruise ship.
Yes, I'm quite a fan of the old ship designs where they were sort of more wood panelling and such. But I must say, I was on a ferry over to the Isle of Wight from Southampton. Portsmouth actually, and that felt like a moving tower block, moving in sort of an early 2000s German hotel tower block, to be exact, from the interior design. So I think it might actually create rather pleasant crossing. I think I shall next time I'm on it, I shall certainly report back and see if it is indeed worth.
Well, from the images I've seen, it does look does look really good. But then you think about it and you think, well, when the Ben McCree came into service, when the Mannanin came into service, did that look really modern to you know what I mean? Because in looking back now, obviously I was not even not even alive, so it would be interesting to know if everyone thought, wow, the new boat, and wow, the interior. But this one, because it's so far advanced compared to everything we've seen before, and it's a hybrid, isn't it? I think the ship.
Yes, it produces
or the vessel as one.
Well, the engines are electric, but they use they generate the power for them through diesel, I think. Yes. But I do want to ask
So it should be also very reliable then.
Yes, it should be, yes. But I did want to ask you a question on this matter, as you proclaim the greatness of the Manxman. Also, she's a wonderful ship called the Manxman. It's sort of there's a contradiction in terms almost there. But that wasn't the question at hand.
Right.
The question is, well, perhaps I should ask you a question later on. But I wanted to ask, do you not think that shows a private, or rather arm's-length company does a better job than government if it avoids bureaucracy? Because it seems they've got a ship. It's relatively on time, bar a problem which is entirely unforeseen, i.e. sea trials. It has to be safe, the boat. It's gone pretty well. It's gone out to tender, and it's only been sort of, I think, three years in the making, 2 years, and it's been very, very quickly done.
Yeah, and they always provided updates. They
exactly.
had a blog.
Would you not say it's done better than the government? Most government projects are done.
Well, that's because it's a business. It needs to make money.
But it's government owned.
Yes, but it's yeah. Well, if government, that's the thing. Government offering things to at arm's length. Do they do a better job? Well, you've got to look at Manx Care. Do you believe that Manx Care's run at arm's length? Do you believe Manx Care's doing a good job?
I don't have overly much interaction with our healthcare system, so I probably not the.
Well, I'm just giving a comparison.
But I do think, yes, perhaps we should have perhaps if a private medical company was set up, it showed it was doing a good job, and then it was acquired by the government. Perhaps that is in the same vein as the Isle of Man Steam Company, who was set up as a private enterprise and then acquired by the government. So it still retains all of its sort of functions and offices.
But then people are quick to blame. You say they do a better job, etc., etc., but people are quick to blame when it gets cancelled and all sorts of. I mean, it's been very reliable at the moment, but it in bad weather, you can't prevent bad weather, can you? It's a bit like the airport. Yes, you can't foresee.
Although I think the airport issues it faces at the moment are rather a lack of air traffic controllers rather than the weather.
But the funny thing was actually a few months ago, it was all about the runway and not having the right runway installed. But we weren't being told that it was actually air traffic. It was all about the runway, wasn't it? That was what was causing delays. Yeah. Then after that, it was all about as soon as they got the electronic system in for the runway, then it was all about air. The delays subsequent to that, I think, were about not having the right amount of air traffic controllers. Anyway, I don't really know why I'm getting on. I've gone on to the airport here. What was I saying?
Transport links.
Oh, and just weather in general. You can't, bad weather occurs. And, it is an inconvenience, but it's one of those things. It happens, and for safety reasons, things don't always travel.
But it should be better now, because the Manxman can travel, as they say. She can travel in much rougher weather.
Can she? Oh, right.
Well, I could be wrong. So, yes. But that's why I remember reading somewhere. So either it says it cannot travel, or it can. I think it can, though. Well, it is a more sizable ship.
Yes, and probably because it's probably, I don't know, could be to do with weight distribution.
Yes.
I don't know. I'm not an expert in that area, but perhaps we should turn to a bit of UK.
Oh yes, one more thing though on this. If anyone from the Isle of Man Steam Packet Company is listening, as I'm sure you will, because of course, if you do want Politibabble to do a tour around your vessel, I think we should be most open to the opportunity to discuss the ins and outs of the wonders of the beautiful ship that is the Manxman.
You haven't mentioned AI, Archie. You said you were going to talk about AI at some point, weren't you?
Sorry, I'm confused. What is AI, Oliver?
Artificial intelligence.
Sorry, I'm pretty sure I'm a human. Yes, I'm certainly not AI. This podcast isn't AI generated at all. So I think, yes, we're human here.
Ah, right.
I was only adjusting there. We are not
Yes.
AI, but we could be AI for all you know. There's some all silly stuff coming out now of AI-generated voices, which sound remarkably like the actual human. It's been creating sort of scam adverts and such. So do you see AI as a sort of a dangerous entity, although that must be stopped?
Right. I think it's one of those things. Technology is something that is rather fastly moving, and I suppose we're a bit slow on what we can actually sort of regulate and prevent from occurring. But yes, do I think AI is a bad thing?
Yes, that's what it is.
I don't know. I think it might be helpful in some areas. I don't know an awful lot about its entire. I think it's one of those things we don't. There's some things we probably don't know what AI is capable of at this stage.
Yes. Well, I do question whether we can call it artificial intelligence or not. I find the word sort of a contradiction in terms to some extent, because can we artificially create intelligence? At the moment, I don't think the models which we call artificial intelligence are actually artificial intelligence. They're merely, I think, mathematical models which are incredibly complex. And they don't, I think like a human would think, and we'd class something as being intelligent. It does, I think, require... It does things faster than we could ever think, of course, but I'm not sure it makes it intelligent. I do further to that. I think it's not so good to be reliant on technology, because let's say, for example, if most of our industries, we rely on AI to do our jobs for us, which we don't want to do, and we put robotics in things, and all of a sudden our electricity grid goes down. Well, we're a bit stumped then, really, because we don't have the resources to actually do things through proper manpower. And I decry a lot of this move to AI. I much prefer, for example, help desks. They love having an AI chatbot now, don't they? And I much prefer picking up a phone and speaking to a person or emailing a person. And I get far too fed up of all of these places now sending you to endless lists of frequently asked questions and help desks like Zendesk and such, when I just want to speak to a person, ask a very simple issue, and they can even put it in a computer. But now, too often, you pick up the phone, you speak to a person on the help desk, and they're actually constrained by a computer model. So you ask them, "Oh, hello, could I please move this to a different address?" "Oh, sorry, sir, it's already gone on our system." The computer is much like the Little Britain sketch. Wonderful TV programme. Which computer says no. It's effectively the society we've moved into, where we don't have proper human interaction. It's very much the computers are doing it all for us, and the computers, I find, are frightfully annoying at times. They don't do what you want it to do. I even recall the same, going to a shop and asking, "Oh, could I get this changed?" And someone's like, "Oh no, sorry, I don't know how to do that. The computer won't let me." And then an elderly sort of shop worker who had been there for so long knew this. I would say, "Oh, it doesn't matter. We can just do this, and solve the problem using sort of our own human lateral thinking." And I think that's the kind of thinking we need, really, not limited to a computer program or a flow chart. It's so awfully dreary and dull.
Yeah. Well,
bureaucracy on steroids, I think AI is. Bureaucracy on steroids.
You like tradition and the traditional way of doing things, don't you, Archie? You know.
Well, I think it's a better way of doing things. It's actually ironically more free, because there isn't a large bureaucracy that you have to tick 50,000 boxes, fill out 50,000 health and safety forms just to go for a walk with a school group. There's a perfect example at school where they had to... It just got so hard to organise trips because they had to fill out so many forms and have so many responsible teachers to so many children. It got mad. It's just sort of... It isn't a particularly dangerous place, the Isle of Man, either.
Yeah, I remember I think I remember in primary school there used to be at times quite a lot of school trips, and then other times, probably when I got a bit older, they tend to happen a little bit less. But then you do things like you go away on for a few days rather than a couple of afternoons here and there going on school trips. But yes, that's another thing is school trips. But surely being in a classroom with a single teacher with 30 children, how does that that doesn't
But
surely
soon,
that
but
needs
soon it won't be a classroom with one teacher. With the revolution of AI going the way it is, it shall
it'll be a robot.
It shall be 30 tablets with AI on teaching the child, which I think would be a terrible shame. Although I have experimented myself, I do admit, with ChatGPT, and I must say I'm quite insulted by it by today's excursion. I asked who hosts the Politibabble podcast, and remember we were created in about, Oliver wasn't here then, in 2020, and Oliver joined in April 2021, I think it was. Must have been.
Bit after
or
April.
May, June.
June. I think
Anyway.
you asked me in about maybe May time. June time.
ChatGPT answered me today when I asked the question, who hosts the podcast Politibabble? It says, as of my knowledge cut off in September 2021, we already existed for a good year and a bit. There is no specific podcast called Politibabble that is widely recognised. I find it a great insult, and obviously I think this shows why AI cannot be trusted. Because we are indeed a specific podcast, and we are widely recognised. So
We're on all the major streaming platforms.
Exactly. I mean, it's and you, dear listener, know that you recognise us. So I think it just awful travesty. And can we trust AI? There was wonderful parts in people doing academic papers for their dissertations, and they got AI to write it, or rather ChatGPT to write it. I'm not sure. I think they deserved being sort of disqualified or getting a third for that, mainly because it uses no ingenuity, because it makes up references for academic papers. It could create me an academic article, and the references sound extraordinarily plausible, and this is why I say it's not intelligent yet.
Yes.
They sound extraordinarily plausible, and the point is they're just that. They're plausible, but they don't exist, because it's predictive text. It knows what's most likely to be the next word that would sound good, but not what it is.
I mean, technology is ever evolving, isn't it? And I suppose that's the thing. You're criticising it there, but it's one of those things. It still probably needs development, and it can't do everything. And that's the downside to it. It can't do everything you want it to do, even though you think it should be capable of it.
Well, I don't think it should be capable of it. I think we shouldn't allow it to do those things.
Well,
but that's my own belief. We should have stopped the motor car, I think, and gone no further.
What about the horse and carriage? I think we should.
The motor car's easier. Yes, I don't mind a motor car. Yes.
Well, I think we should sort of now hop onto UK politics, unless there's anything. Oh, stay on Manx politics. Let's go back to Manx politics and let's talk about the.
Oliver is obviously imitating here Mr. Flip-Flop Keir Starmer, flip-flopping from position to position. But yes, Captain Hindsight. Well, what are we?
It's democracy. It's democracy. Is I think is that what Keir said when he got challenged on that matter about changing opinion?
Perhaps.
I think I can't remember.
There isn't democracy on the Politibabble podcast. You forget that fact, Oliver.
I think it's cited in quite clearly in Section 1 of the contract.
Oh dear, don't bring up those things, Oliver. We shan't be having a case here in employment law, certainly not. But yes, do continue. What were we addressing?
So we were talking about how I think it was last month's sitting, or the sitting before that, of Tynwald, the Isle of Man's Parliament, trying to remove the bishop, which got voted, was it 16? No. In the Keys, it was 16 for 8 against. I could be wrong on that.
There we are.
But it got defeated in the Legislative Council.
8 MHKs voted for the motion to remove, 16 voted against.
That's it.
And the Legislative Council, Legco, voted unanimously against removing the bishop.
So yes, the bishop will stay in Tynwald.
Is excellent, yes.
I think the current bishop is set to retire in October, so that was the main motive behind Joni Farragher's motion. But as Joni sort of said, in hindsight, maybe if I brought it to the Keys first, it actually would have. Did you say 16-4 in the Keys?
16 voted against the bishop being removed.
Right.
Yes.
I thought it was the other way around, but that
She said it was a lost opportunity. But she said a vote on an amendment beforehand shows that the House of Keys were in favour of removing the Church's vote.
Yes, there we go. Oh, that was at the vote.
I still think it would be a dreadful shame. The Legislative Council, I think, has become, by it being elected by the Keys, I'm not sure it does its proper function. I quite like these Legislative Council members at the moment. I think they do their function, but I'm not sure it does their function properly. Yes?
Yes, so that was what the area I was talking about earlier was the removing the vote.
The vote,
the
not
vote,
the bishop.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the motion was about removing the bishop, though, but they did an amendment on removing the vote, and that passed in the Keys, and that sort of showed, well, if we'd brought it to the Keys in the first place, then we could have had a bit more progress. But it just goes to show, well, the Keys voted. And this is how the Ireland's political system, the Keys, which are the publicly elected members, voted for the bishop to have his vote removed, but because the Legislative Council unanimously voted against, then it stays. And obviously the Legislative Council is not publicly elected.
That was only because the amendment failed. The amendment failed overall.
Yes.
But if the vote passed in the Keys and failed in Legco, it could be brought back to Tynwald in the next sitting to have a combined vote.
Right.
Because it has to pass in Keys and Legco.
So a combined vote, that would mean just a simple majority, is it?
Yes, of the whole chamber. But I'm not sure it would pass. But of course, I think the Keys would be happy removing the bishop's vote to some extent because it gives them more power. It's another person who can't vote against them because they're not replacing the bishop with another elected figure. They're keeping him in without a vote. I think, personally, I'd think, why bother having him in if he doesn't have a vote? And I think we should have the bishop in. I should be interested to see if the next bishop of Sodor and Man shall be quite as good as this current bishop. I should be interested to that. But I think it's good to preserve tradition. I still think we should have kept the Attorney General with the vote on the matters, and the Deemsters too, and the Paymaster General, and all of those positions that were originally the Legislative Council and chaired by the Lieutenant Governor, I thought were quite good.
The Executive Council, back in the 1970s.
Yes, prior to the new developments and so on.
Yeah.
I think there was a nice assistant to it, especially because we're a small island. We're not.
Well, I think it came to an end in the 1970s,
it did,
didn't it?
Yes.
Yes, I think they're having a current review into the role of the Attorney General, aren't they? I think the government.
Perhaps,
I could be wrong on that matter as well. But
yeah.
I'd just like to say, I often will say, I could be wrong on that matter because I don't want to say that my word is gospel.
It's far too diplomatic on the matter.
Yes. Well, I don't want to misinform our listeners. That wouldn't be not fair.
Well, I think that leads us very nicely onto a topic that got covered not so in the far distant past, which we haven't touched, but I'm sure you're not fed up on because we bring a new perspective here on Politibabble. Is Mr. Boris Johnson, the COVID inquiry, did he lie or did he not lie?
Former Prime Minister and, former MP.
Yes.
Boris Johnson, there's going to be a by-election next week, in fact.
3, I think.
Yes, next Thursday.
Yes.
Who will seek a replacement for his constituency. But I think it's quite clear that Mr. Johnson has a reputation for lying.
But do you think he lied to the House?
Well,
intentionally misled is
intentionally misled.
Do you think he intentionally misled the House?
I think so. Yes.
Interesting. Why?
Why? Because it's quite clear that there's two different narratives, and that it was quite clear that there were parties going on, and he definitely knew about them because he attended them.
But if he thought at the time that no rules were broken,
but he
was
the rule maker. So that's the thing. He was head of the government, head of policy. He quite clearly knew what was going on surrounding COVID.
You must remember also, he is the Prime Minister. There's a lot of delegated functions because government is I would say, overlarge.
But
The government
COVID
has to delegate.
But COVID was the main priority of the government at the time, so I'm pretty sure he would be pretty well informed of what was going on.
But the gatherings he was fined at were very, I'd argue, extraordinarily minor infractions, where it wasn't really, it was very trivial matters they decided to fine him on. And if you're walking through an after-works party to thank people for their service, and you shake a few hands and then you go up to your office to work, I'm not exactly sure how he'd know, and his officials assured him at the time that all rules were followed. They assured him before his answers that all rules were followed. So I'd say, yes, he did, in one aspect, mislead the House in the fact that there were parties, and he said there weren't. But I disagree with the fact he intentionally misled the House.
But if you
I don't think he intentionally did it, because no MP would. It's silly.
If you want to argue that there was no parties and
Yes.
that they were gatherings, etc., they could have done an alternative way of thanking the staff. Stand outside in the gardens of Number 10 and applaud each other.
I argue to
Rather
Oliver.
than
I
having
argue to Oliver. These parties that Mr. Johnson attended in those respects were indeed in the garden of Number 10.
Yes, but it's quite clear from the
They were outside, and they were, to his knowledge, socially distanced.
Right. Well, some
How do you
were
know
some were inside, like board games and Christmas parties, which we have photographic evidence of, and it's quite clear that Mr. Johnson was not social distancing.
Did he attend those? He attended one in an office on a Zoom call. Is this not in spirit of the time?
I think we're getting
being on
down
a
to the
Zoom
specific.
call?
We're getting down to
Yes.
the specifics there.
You've been fed the lies by Mrs. Sue Gray.
Well, that's another matter.
For legal reasons, that was satirical there. Yes. I suppose I'm not there for libel if Mrs. Sue Gray doesn't think she was lying. But there is the other questions to ask. Was Sue Gray on a witch hunt after being hunted by the Labour Party? Is that where she was looking to go? These are questions, I think, that need to be asked.
Well, that's true as well, as she becomes the head chief of staff in the Labour Party. She clearly is a very well sought after public official, and clearly has good qualities in some aspects.
But it has
that
been
makes her
shown
a
by
good...
the Cabinet Office report that Mrs. Gray, or Miss Gray, did indeed have conversations with Labour whilst she was still
Well, I'm
a
sure
member of
that's
the Civil Service, which is against Civil Service Code.
I'm sure that's going to be a firing point for the Tories at PMQs over the coming months when she's allowed to officially join the
yes.
Labour Party in, I believe, September, after everything's sort of blown up. Because I imagine after they've finally got into Johnson's phone and accessed the WhatsApp messages, probably by the end of today, after he finally remembers the password, that
He did want to give them the phone though. So
did he?
I think Johnson is I don't think he isn't one really to throw his career willy-nilly by purposely lying to Parliament when the lies can be disproved rather easily. I think generally it was a bit of a stitch-up, especially by the committee. I watched the hearings at the time. The committee very much seemed to be on a warpath that he did intentionally mislead. They made up their minds before they'd even started.
Oh, are you going to be talking about a kangaroo court now? Are you on the Johnson? You're on the Johnson side of all this.
I do
quite
think it was a
clear.
kangaroo court. Even if it was Mr. Starmer being put through the same process over Beergate and he said no rules are broken, I would still think it kangaroo court if it was done in the same manner.
You know that Johnson did wrong. You can say, you must be of that opinion that Johnson did wrong surrounding the surrounding
Well, I think
COVID.
it's an honourable intention to want politics to be entirely squeaky clean, but it's not achievable because we are all human and we complain all the time that our politicians are far too inhuman, that they're far too slimy, smiley, sort of smarmy figures. But we wonder why, because they're held to such a high public rigour standard they can't do one step wrong.
But if,
Isn't that sort of slightly concerning?
But shouldn't they, shouldn't they take on board the 7 is it the 7 Nolan principles? They should fulfill them. Isn't that what every politician or public official should fulfill? Isn't that the ambition, that you stay true to those principles? And you're now basically saying, oh well, it should be accepted because it's normal, or
human,
or we should normalise it.
I didn't say we should normalise. I think a country's leader must first and foremost work for the betterment of the country, and that is the single principle I think that should be achieved.
But on occasion, if they can't possibly do that because they feel that they are above the law,
or if they're not then working for the betterment of the country, they should be got rid of.
Well, there you go then. So,
but I believe Boris Johnson did in his heart want to work for the betterment of the country. I don't think that's really a matter of question. But either way, we must, I suppose, leave this thorny topic away.
Yes,
as we side. Yes.
Well, I'm sure after the WhatsApp messages are I'm sure, and by the time
I perhaps might eat my hat.
Yes, you might. I mean, we don't necessarily exactly know what went on, as we
can't read Mr. Johnson's brain.
Yeah.
I think we must remember. Yes.
Yeah.
Indeed.
We will find out more as we're in July 2023. I'm sure after the WhatsApp messages and whatever else is found out about what Johnson has said, because they will actually include a lot more information.
Yes.
But anyway.
Yes, we're seeing, I think, the collapse of the SNP in Scotland over some time. I'm not sure they'll be faring particularly well at the next election. After
membership is down.
Financial scandals. Yes,
and obviously
on.
The membership,
yes.
I think before we find out about sort of...
Mr. Youssef, yes.
Yeah, was it Nicola Sturgeon who announced that the membership had gone down, or was that Mr. Youssef?
I think it might have been Nicola Sturgeon's husband, who was the chairman of the party at the time.
Right.
It's very complicated.
Peter Murrell.
Yes.
I
think in other news, Mrs. Sturgeon's learning how to drive too.
She passed her theory test.
Yes, she passed her theory test.
And then she got arrested the next day, I think.
Not charged, we must say that.
No, she just
released
got arrested.
Without charge, yes.
Yes, that was very sort of... the news was, they were quick to jump onto that, weren't they? They're quick to jump on whatever they want at the moment, aren't they? With criticising not criticising, but exposing the SNP, or
there loves to be political scandal at the moment.
Yes,
I feel. I think we're getting people thinking if there's not a political scandal, is politics happening?
Yes.
But then, unfortunately, it gives rise to the rise of managerial politics, which we see the likes of Mr. Sunak and Mr. Starmer being quite. I suppose I describe them in character references as sort of pallid figures, really.
And this sort of comes on what you wanted to discuss, didn't you?
They don't excite me. They don't make me think, yes, they're doing
There's
something.
not an awful lot of... I don't know, yes. They don't quite have the charisma and the passion and the drive. You know what I mean?
Yes. I personally feel it's quite like bank managers got in to politics and has decided to run the country, and it's playing it very, very safe at the moment. And then we have even the deputy prime minister. My gosh, I watched Prime Minister Questions the other week where he was standing in for Mr. Sunak,
which seems to be a regular.
This is Mr. Oliver Dowden, and he just gives the most pre-prepared jokes, which are not funny at all, and he works them into the answer when they're not relevant. And I think, gosh, is this what our politics has become from the days where we had great performances at PMQs, even from Mr. Tony Blair, who I don't like in so many ways, or Mr. Cameron, or Mr. Hague, or even Mrs. Thatcher. We had proper, I suppose, politicians who were very much charismatic with the answer, with the information, didn't just go and read from a script.
Well, yes, now, it does seem sort of, they always say it's theatrical PMQs. Yes, it seems theatrical now because it seems as though that it's all...
It seems like they're in a bad pantomime.
Yes.
When the pantomime has gone wrong, the actors have forgotten their words, and they're trying to make funny jokes when they're not funny.
PMQs is still theatrical because it's so scripted.
Yes. It's just...
I think when PMQs is off the cuff, that's when it's at its best because, then people would say it's super overdramatic.
That's how it should be because
and that's what interests the public.
Know their brief. They should know their brief. So they're sitting there, They know their brief. They can answer the question, and they should answer the question.
And that shows that you've got a leader who is well informed, who stands by what they're saying. Because if you're reading from a script, then you're either unsure of what's going on, or you're not exactly.
And they don't answer the question either. That's the part that gets me. I was watching videos. I can criticise the Conservative Party here. They don't answer the question. Mr. Sunak doesn't answer the question. Mr. Dowden doesn't really answer the question.
But what I'm not a big fan of. Often, and that's the one thing with PMQs, is when the opposition or whoever's giving a question give more a scenario, like they give a statement rather than a question.
Well, they give a question then a long statement following.
Yeah.
But it reminds me very, very much of some clips I've seen, or rather sittings I've seen of the Canadian Parliament, where they have something called the Committee of the Full, or the House, of the Whole, sorry, where the whole House sits, lower house sits together, and the ministers usually on questioning, and the leader of the opposition gets unlimited time for his questions, and he can literally ask a question. If the minister doesn't answer, he can cut them off and ask the question again. And there's one question being asked recently, which was the Conservative leader of the opposition was asking the Liberal member, Minister, can you tell us what is the average cost of a home in Ottawa for Canadian citizens? And he says, since 2020, we've increased jobs by 53%. And you can see he was so knowing that he wasn't answering the question because he didn't want to answer it. And that's just the direction I see us heading now, where we don't even answer the questions.
And it's like,
it's dreadful.
It's like Home Secretary
Suella Braverman
not turning up to give statements or answer urgent questions, and also the Conservative Party not giving statements, not announcing certain policies in Parliament, but doing it to the press. And, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, Speaker of the House, saying that this is totally unacceptable.
Yes.
And
no, I quite agree. I think the Conservative Party, I've always thought, and I'm still a Conservative, I still think the party does have it in itself. It's supposed to be there to uphold these things, to show we are good, well-principled and sort of virtued people. Not virtue-seeking, but virtued people, and we have our principles. But it seems now we've descended into a politics where we're choosing between two very similar parties. Even with the Labour Party adjusting its economics to be more conservative because they know that's where economics should lie. It seems we're choosing between two awful situations.
Yeah.
One party is at least less woke than the other. I usually use woke there in the pejorative term, but I do fear if we get Labour in, we will not just have bad economic policy, but bad social policy and bad cultural policy. I think we'd be in very dangerous waters, and more dangerous waters than we are currently with this government.
But at least with Labour, we'll have well-funded public services.
But will we? Because how are they saying?
Well, how are they going to fund them?
How will they fund them?
Yeah.
And it's already been said their funding pledges don't match up.
Well, that's the thing. I agree with much of Labour's sort of policies in a way, and some of their ideas. But like you say, when it comes to funding them, they're not always. It's like how will you fund the NHS? To give it a greater amount of money. Well, we'll scrap the non-dom tax status, and that's it.
But I think that again won't make the same amount of money they think it will.
Because then you say, all the people
nom-doms will move to another country where they can nom-dom along.
Yeah, we'll go off to another country, which So that's one area. And how are Labour going to drive growth to the highest levels or whatever? They too actually, like the Conservative Party, like slogans, and like to like the slogans. I mean, the Conservative Party is known for its 3-word slogans.
Yes, in some aspects, yes. But I preferred the days of Mrs. Thatcher with her rhetoric. Really, I must say I don't agree with all her economic policies to some extent, but I think Mrs. Thatcher was at least an upstanding politician who had values to some extent. I think it's the last.
But she didn't get everything right, did she? You know, you look at me like she did, but you believe she did get everything right?
I think we would be in a better place if we had a leader like Mrs. Thatcher.
Okay.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, are there any more topics that we've got left on our list to discuss?
Well, it seems, yes, the Labour Party has gone very, very censorship in chief with its members recently, with Jeremy Corbyn being barred to stand as a Labour parliamentary member in the next election. I find that rather shocking.
That was quite old. Did you not know about
Well,
this?
I think he's now been barred to stand. I think that was fairly recent, was it?
I feel like it was a while back now, but...
Hold on a minute.
Well, that's interesting. Buckingham Palace is reopened to public.
Oh yes, no, it was in late. Yes, no, it was in late March. That was why.
Right.
We covered it.
It is a while, isn't it?
Yes,
April, May, June, July. It's coming up to
5 months. Yeah,
which feels like you never think that March to July is that long, but it is.
Yes. But anyway, yes, he was blocked from standing by the Labour National Executive, from standing as a Labour MP. I think it's quite ridiculous Starmer's done that. Considering Starmer supported him through most of his
that was the thing
as well. Yes.
Were we not talking about I feel like some of the stuff it was ongoing whilst the podcast
yes, it was ongoing,
it was sort of a video of him in the lobby House of Commons and going I think it was like a Sky News interview. Would you call Mr. Corbyn a friend or whatever? Do you remember that?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, well, I suppose Corbyn, Starmer is trying to centre the Labour Party as much as he can, isn't he?
Yes. Which is a shame, I think.
What do they say? He's just a Tory with a red tie or whatever.
I must say, I don't quite agree with that. Purely on his social policy.
Yes,
and
of course.
He's much more sort of a social justice warrior than a Conservative should be, really. So yes, I'm not entirely sure I quite agree with that, but I see the sentiment certainly. Yes, I think that covers most of what we've got to discuss, and I think unless there's anything else pertinent you want to add.
No, not particularly. It's been nice to just have a little chat again on current affairs mainly.
Indeed. And I'm sure we're coming to the end of this style of Politibabble of sorts with Oliver and I both hopefully. Well, Oliver hopefully and I will be heading off to university later this year.
Yeah, I suppose we should have really announced that.
We should have announced it at the beginning, but because we know you loyal listener like to listen to every little last drop of our words, it does not matter where we put it in. But I think we shall plan to have a retrospective episode looking really at what Politibabble is, both in the physical, the metaphysical concepts of what we are, where we have been and where we've come from and where we've got to, before we change over to a format where we might, if you're lucky, dear listener, we might indeed put some specials on for you in sort of the post-future of Politibabble, where we move, perhaps, as the world moves from the physical universe to the metaverse, from truth to meta-truth, from physics to metaphysics. Perhaps we'll move to the meta-podcasting of the meta-Politibabble. Perhaps, all certainly to come in later weeks, I'm sure. So yes, it's been certainly wonderful to be back here to catch up. And Oliver and I, obviously, yes, it's been a long time waiting for a new episode of Politibabble. And I'm sure you, dear listener, shall also have been waiting, edging on your seats, constantly clicking that refresh button. So I do hope you've enjoyed, a escapade on various current affairs, ranging from the domestic to the national levels.
Yes, well, that does conclude this week's episode of Politibabble. Thank you for joining us. Again, if you want to listen to any of our podcasts, you can go on to any of the major streaming platforms or go to manxradio.com/podcasts/Politibabble. And that will conclude this week's episode. Thank you for joining us. You've been
Politibabbled.